I'm glad I can be here as well.
Voice is something that I am extremely interested in. It seems a really deep and unusual topic.
Yeah.
And before we get into it, I imagine there's actually some people that have met you or know you from your work or have been to a class with you playing in the background. Though, I would love for you to give a few words about, in your own words, what it is that you do and what you're most passionate about doing.
It's an interesting question I want to start with. I think ultimately what it comes down to, the most passionate thing for me is really helping people discover the capacity of being empowered, and I happen to use the mechanism of voice.
Right.
When we're able to communicate effectively, when we're able to truly listen, we're able to kind of pull in the different archetypes of who we are and integrate them in a way that we can communicate. I mean, I've seen it in my own life. All of a sudden, we speak different to the people that we love. We can express creatively differently. Even like just the way life goes is different. It's no longer about how does this look to others, but truly what comes from inside of me. And so it's trying to create a space where people can pull from within them and really move from there forward. The idea being resonance. If your soul and your body and your mind are connected, you have greater resonance in your expression. You feel more fulfilled. They feel more fulfilled. It works better. And then within that, I create music, and I'm a musician and songwriter and producer and yoga teacher and all of these other things, but all of them kind of are these tools that I pull from to ultimately help people really effectively communicate themselves in a way that is aligned with who they are in a very deep way and aligned with what's possible inside of them.
Yeah, very cool. I love this idea of resonance, and it's something I want to dive into with you a little more because I think it's very important. But before we do, you so remind me in what you're saying of one of my teachers, Mattingley, who I took the signing training.
Yeah, I watched his thing. You showed it to me.
Yeah. Right? And he, what I realized very quickly was spending a week with him, and he literally trains people in how to sigh. But the sign has nothing to do with it. And even the voice really has nothing to do with it. But he was coaching people on how to find liberation in themselves, and the voice was the mechanism to do that. Totally. Which totally echoes what you just said.
Totally.
And before we dive into that, I want to know something, because I just found out that you come from, I wouldn't say a small farm, but small town, large farm, Canada, in the middle of nowhere, in Alberta, Canada.
Yeah.
How was it that you, well, two questions. How was it that you stumbled along the voice as the mechanism of your life passion? And the other is, what is your earliest memory that you associate with resonance and voice and singing?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay. I'm going to start with the one that you just said, which was, what are your first memories? Because this popped into my head. Recently I had a moment, and you know those moments where you have a memory and you're like, oh my God, that's like everything to me.
Yes.
My dad and I are very similar and yet very different. My dad is totally a farmer. So there's a joke in Canada that there once was a prairie man who loved his wife so much he almost told her.
That reminds me of a lot of New Zealand men.
That's my father.
That's really funny.
Okay. But I remember being like 3 or 4, it's one of my first memories, and I talked all the time. And my dad took me on this big walk, like out into the woods, because we lived right by the woods and water. And I'd talk and be like, Amy, stop, just listen. Amy, stop, just listen, just listen. Just listen. And he would repeat that again and again. And though voice is the mechanism of my work, I would say listening is far more important than vocalizing. So I would say, as like memories and connections, that to me is everything. Because voice comes from listening. Real voice comes from listening. I don't think about what I'm going to say and then say it. I have a feeling, and I follow it and map it through my body, and I express it. So I think that would be the big one. The other memory I have is being like 3. So I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and I'm like an accident at the end of the pile. So my oldest brother is 15 years older, and he was babysitting me, and I was like 3 years old, 2 or 3, like super young. And you know that, I don't know if you know the song Rockin' Robin, like, Tweedledee, Tweedledee. He would put it on repeat for me. I'm about, 3 years old. I put it on headphones, and 2 to 3 hours, I would just sing it. And that was it. And I would just sing on repeat. again and again. So I mean, I sang from a really, really young age.
Interesting.
And I loved singing. And I'm really lucky in the sense that no one really, I mean, I annoyed my brother for sure as I got older, but like when it really comes down to it, yeah, I got told to shut up a bit, but not really. Like, I really had space to sing and be loud because of the giant farm.
That's amazing. I think a little unusual too. Especially to be encouraged, as you say, from kind of a totally different viewpoint and a different world to encourage you in the even just the realm of singing. Right?
Well, I mean, everyone loved music. So my brother would have been a teenager. He was into music. Everyone was into music in their own way. So I grew up listening to all my brother's music, right? Like AC/DC and like Chris de Burgh, who scared the bejeebers out of me. His songs when I was little scared the crap out of me. But yeah, so I just kind of listened to what they listened to, and then my sister, and what she would kind of inform me in, and yeah.
And when did this go from, from these early memories, when did it crystallize into something that you knew you wanted to do in the world?
Well, this is gonna get a little heavier. I sang forever. All throughout, I sang. I just never thought it was something I could do. When I was 21, my sister passed away. So we went through a lot with that, and I won't go into the details, but basically, big self-reflection. I looked at my life, and I was, partying way too much and taking a lot of drugs and kind of living not healthy at all. And I kind of, after that happened, I stopped doing a lot of that because I wanted to see where I was at. And I decided I was going to shift some things, so I did like Canadian Idol on a lark, and I got in the top 100.
I don't know what those words were that you just said.
Canadian Idol? So American Idol, the singing? Yeah, I did the Canadian version. And I got to like the top 100.
Oh shit.
I was like, I think I want to sing, and then that happened. And then I went to India for 3 months. I took a sabbatical from school and just landed in India to go, what am I doing? And I just went there to kind of follow the universe and see what it wanted to tell me. And I was in an ashram in India, and I realized in there, like super clear, I was like, I'm dedicating my life to music and healing. And I just didn't know what that meant yet. Yeah, and then everything just kind of, it's only in the last 5 years that it's all really fallen into this is my work. But I was kind of collecting pieces from all over before that. And so it just kind of kept cascading from being in different bands and trying out different music and becoming a songwriter to teaching yoga and medicine ceremonies and all of that kind of stuff, to eventually it all kind of converging after some stuff happened. I figured some stuff out, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It's, my partner is teaching a retreat at the moment, and she has this woman, Rev Jo, who's an amazing, extremely wise reverend from Agape Church in California. And she'll always say, your message is in your mess. So you look back at your messes, and like so often those moments that are so trying, and where it's like almost an enforced self-reflection, where you have to go a little deeper than you do on day to day and really figure out what's going on.
Totally.
And I love that, to circle back to the idea of resonance, it sounds like you got the download, like that message, I put it in my words, hopefully it applies, of a knowing of what you had to do, not a thinking of what you had to do. So as you sit in this ashram, it's like, boom, this is what I have to do. And how is less important.
Yeah.
Right? And then that to me smacks of resonance, because when you get those messages, if you try to do anything else but, things don't go so well.
Totally. Yeah. No, I not only agree, I was like, it's funny because throughout my life there's been these little things that I'm like I was doing folk music, and I was like, at some point I'm going to flip to mantra. I know that that's in my future, it's just not the time. And at the time, my partner he's not my partner now, but he is an incredibly successful producer in Canada, like crazy successful. Very, very smart, very, very all of these things. And I got totally wrapped up in him. And if I hadn't had that relationship, I don't know that I would feel confident producing music.
Right.
I learned more from him about music and singing, and more than anything, permission, than I could have asked for. And even in the first the first few weeks of us dating, I told my best friend, I think I even wrote it in a journal, I said, we will last 2 to 2.5 years. After that, I'm going to figure out who I am as an artist, and he's going to figure out who he is after his divorce. And it was like to the letter. When we split, like I wrote songs about it before it happened. It was like it fell apart, and he was everything. He was my mentor. He was the guy that could save me and make me famous and do all the things. And I needed it to just hit me. I needed to just get all of those kind of codependency things trashed at one time, so I could kind of rebuild. And it was after that I would say I switched from being somebody who felt like I was seeking and thought somebody might save me, to just being like, no, I've got this.
Wow. You know, it's not so strange that it happened, but it is very strange that you had an awareness of it, a recognition of it beforehand, hey?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, life's kind of like that for me, but yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Sometimes it does that. I mean, currently not so much, but at the time it was real.
Well, look, let's talk about something you touched on as well. Because, you know, one thing I love about teachers, it's one thing to speak and get the perspective of, let's say, we'll use voice as an example, of someone that's always sung, had no problem with it, and gone there ever since they were little, as opposed to someone that's always loved singing but struggled with the permission, struggled with the ability to do it. And I love teachers that have actually had the troubles along the way, because I tend to find they know how to teach it better.
Yeah.
It's like if I've always been flexible and I know how to do splits, I'm not the best teacher to teach someone else to do it. So the question I have, and this is something that my own voice coach spoke to me about, it was a line that I'd love to get your opinion on, which is, there's a universal shame around voice. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, whether it rings true to you and why you think that is.
I agree that you have to go through something. When I realized I wanted to work on voice, it was after I finally was able to stand up for myself and my family, and particularly with my father, who grew up just in a different kind of time and place, and I really struggled with that for a long time. Like really, really struggled with that. And I'd say it took 10 years of actually working at it before I could do it. And the day that I realized that a big part of my wanting to work with voice was that I really wanted to work with women who are struggling to communicate in the family dynamic in a way that they felt heard. And that hit me. And when I wrote it, I was like, oh shit. It's like so much shame, so much embarrassment, so much not feeling good enough, so much taking things on, all of that. And so I agree. I think voice, I think that's the power of voice, is because like there's somatic holding patterns in the body that hold our trauma, I believe our voice is no different.
Gotcha.
So I'll work very archetypally, and let's say in the realm of singing, I'll put different singers on. You know, and you'll get somebody who's like a performer, like very glee, like da da na 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 na. And I use this example because this is one where I see a lot of people be like, ugh, like that bothers me. But if I can't integrate that aspect of voice, that aspect of voice says I can take up space. It says I can, and I don't care if you like it or not. And it's not that I want it, I mean, I don't want to be like that all the time, but if I can't accept that part of my voice and I say that that's just bad, I've just limited a whole arena of communication. And so I believe there is that, is it's different voices that carry shame. You know, for another person who's very loud, the vulnerable voice might carry a lot of shame.
Totally. It reminds me a little of Brene Brown says, you can't selectively numb emotions.
Yeah.
So if you numb anger, you'll also numb happiness. And it sounds the same as what you're saying in voice. If I numb the part of me that's willing to take up space, and I numb the part of me that's also ability to be soft.
Totally.
What do you think it is that, because I totally hear you with women in the home, and that resonates with you, obviously. I also see it in men as well in different ways for different reasons. Why is it that the voice, when you're attuned to it, seems to be so universal? Why is it that it's something that's so obviously stuck in people? Is it the voice that's stuck, or that, like, you know what I mean? Like, what's the dynamic?
I mean, I think there's both. I think there's elements of both. Something that I find interesting that happens a lot is, like, I'll work with a client and they're like, oh, give me some vocal techniques.
Yes.
Because I want to sound better. I'm like, okay, let's figure out what you really want, and then we'll go from there. And it's, you know, I really want to be able to communicate, like, with my employees better. And then we go there. And then it's like, okay, now let's dig out what's causing you to say that. And then we get really clear and specific on what it is. And once they get to that point, I usually say, listen to your voice. And it's everything that they already want. And so I think somatically, our voice carries all of our stories, all of our blinders, all of our blocks. And that's why it's universal. and also universal in the sense that if I talk to you like this, and I'm just, hi James, I'm really excited, can we work together? I think it'd be really fun to work together, right? It doesn't...
Hi, Amy, that'd be great. Let's get right on it.
All right, sweet. Like, it's just, it doesn't land. And the reason it doesn't land is we feel it, right? Like, I can feel that you're being inauthentic.
Yes, you can.
And you can say, and that's why it's so fucking confusing, is you can feel somebody being fake, but they're saying all the right things.
Yes.
But if you learn to tune more and more to your sense of feeling, then you can communicate with your whole body and your whole being. And I think empathy and voice are very related.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's part of also why it's universal, is not only do we express it, but we hear it and we take it on, and it has an energy that ripples through our entire body.
Mm. Yeah, totally. More and more, I realize for me that my voice is my barometer of connection to the present moment. And it's crazy because I spent most of my life completely unaware of it. I think there's a few categories of people. There are people that, the voice is the thing that happens when I open my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a category of people that are kind of aware of it and maybe do some singing.
Yeah.
And then I think there's the awareness that you're talking about, is the connection between the soma and the sounds. And the soma comes first. So it's like the people that come to you and say, hey, I really want voice techniques to sound better, remind me of the people like, I really want to do yoga so I can do the splits.
Yeah, totally.
It's the backwards way round if you're looking for the deeper layer. So it sounds like what you're saying is, yes, I can work on all of the techniques to make my voice more dropped in or resonant, or I can find a way to become dropped in and resonant, and then my voice follows with that.
Yeah, exactly. I developed like a kind of a way that you get into voice, and I call it the Triad of resonance. And the first one is to attend, which means to actually become very present to where you actually are. And it's kind of about admission and permission. If I can really admit that, I should be able to speak to that person, it's like, okay, you want to be able to speak to your partner, your brother, your sister, your dad, whatever, but you can't tell the waiter that they sent you the wrong food. Maybe you don't start there. Maybe you need to understand that you're terrified of, if you're terrified of communicating these giant leaps, it's like someone being like, I can do the splits, who's never done the splits, right? And they end up tearing themselves apart. So first we attend, which means we just get so honest. And then when we're that honest, with that will come, the shame, the fear, the guilt, the sadness, whatever. Then we attune. And attuning is where we open ourselves to grace and to guidance. Maybe we sing mantra or we pray, and we take this convoluted shit mess of emotion and express it in a way that doesn't need to be articulated right, just offered. And we offer it, and we offer it. And then from there, once we've kind of brought those together, then we speak. Then we articulate. And eventually, sometimes that comes faster, sometimes that takes longer. But those aspects to me are all part of what resonance is, of what it is to communicate. And it'll just keep deepening and opening, as we get older, as we have more experiences, hopefully older and wiser. So that's how I see them all kind of going together and moving into articulation.
Yeah, I love that. It's so hard to put maps on things like this. You know what I mean? And even that, any map you can put on something like this is inadequate, but I particularly love the first step, the attending, of being really honest, because this is going to be one of the questions that popped up for me as you're speaking, is it sounds like because you've said a few times you work on voice and you work on communication, because they can be separate. I can work on how to make my voice better, and I can work on how to communicate more effectively, but you're combining them through it. Am I right in thinking that the communication stems mainly from the attending? So can you I love that example you gave, can you give a few more examples so people get the idea?
Attending and communication. All that popped up. My pretend boyfriend Phil, who I talk about all the time. But I use him as an example as, you come home, similar nonviolent communication thoughts is, you come home, you've been home working or whatever, my partner comes home, gives me a quick kiss on the cheek and goes to play video games. Super common thing that can happen. And I just start, he doesn't care, and I've been here all day, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
you know, the whole thing's spinning
Classic.
out, and the whole story's going on. And so then what do? I end up treating him with distance, and I wonder why he's being distant. You know, I start negating him, or I try to I start people pleasing. That would be more my tone, right? Like, how do I be like over kind so that I can actually deal with it?
Let me just ask who I am to turn off the weed whacker. Pak Waya, sekarang video mungkin nanti untuk machine, ya? Okay. Speaking of voice and sound, there's a little bit of Bali sound coming in. Okay. All right, so your pretend boyfriend Phil.
Yeah, my pretend boyfriend Phil. I just
that.
use this example a lot because it's a good one. But if then instead of going off, I just actually can stop and go, okay, what am I actually upset about? And start discerning, you know, what am I thinking right now? What am I feeling? And what are the actual facts?
Yeah.
You know, he walked in and gave me a kiss. He went to go play video games. Who knows where he's at? I can imagine he's avoiding me or he's this or that, but I actually have no idea. And I'm riled up. So what's happening for me? Well, I'm feeling lonely or I'm feeling sad. And as long as if I can see that that's what's happening, I'm like, oh, I'm having these sensations. And then look at like what thoughts might be causing those sensations. And kind of step back a little differently, then it's a very different thing to go, hey Phil, why aren't you loving me? You know, you should really be here. Or going, hey babe, can I chat with you about something? I would really love to feel connected right now. Would it be cool if I just like came and snuggled? Like, it's a very different thing. And one is going to breed more defensiveness, and the other one breeds understanding. And I think, you know, I give a few examples. There is so much respect in being honest. It took me a long time to realize just how respectful it is to tell somebody the truth. And it's a demonstration of respect. If I respect you, I mean, the people personally I really respect are people who are grounded, they're level-headed, they don't tend to spin out a lot. I just respect that a lot. But I'm going to actually precursor it with a metaphor. If you tell your employees that they're stealing and they're not, they will start. So if I already start a conversation with you thinking that you're against me, I'm causing that. Now if I start a conversation with you respecting your ability to discern and be present with me, then I'm also opening that.
Totally.
And to me, that is an action of respect.
100%. I love that. There's actually, it's maybe a bit of an aside, but you might find it interesting. There was some amazing studies done with rats or mice. And they had this maze, and it was exactly the same maze. And the first people were a bunch of university students. They got to handle the mice for 30 seconds and put in the maze, and they timed how long it took. Now the first group got told that the mice that they were handling the first time around were like the dunces of the mice world, like below average IQs. And sure enough, because they were kind of dumb mice, they went through the maze, but they did it pretty slow. And the second group of mice, they were told they were the Ratsteins, like the Einsteins of the like super smart rats, handled them for 30 seconds, and they went through the maze, and sure enough, they went faster. And of course, the rub is that they were exactly the same statistically mice, that there was no difference in IQ at all. But just the 30 seconds of relating and connecting, just in the way that it was held, produced an entirely different effect.
Totally. So
if I come to you, as you say, or you're already with a belief or a conception or a bias or a judgment that's negative, let's say, we can't get away from judgment, and of course it's going to affect the way that we talk.
Totally. I think that's everything. I think that it's our biggest challenge. And it's funny, I chat with friends. One of my greatest, desires in my practice or anything is that I can meet people from that space. I remember once I did this program, and honestly, I probably didn't run it the best that I could have. It was my first time. I was working like 16 hours a day. It was nuts. And I took in all the participants one at a time, and I said, I want you to say anything. Like, you can get mad, you can blow up, you can swear, you can do anything you want. You can call me names. Like, I want you to just let it out. And they did. And instead of being like, oh, how dare you say that? I was like, wow, like, you sound really frustrated, or you sound really hurt.
Mm.
I'm not going to take it on, but I do want to understand your needs. So I want to be able to listen so effectively that even though you're saying all of these words that are mean or whatever, that I don't actually see them, I see past them, and I hear past them, and then I meet them there. And then there's space, right?
Yeah, space.
And I mean, I'm so grateful when people have done that for me. If I can do that for other people,
I think it's the definition of holding space, right? And I also love this idea. So the first step is attunement, which is something like being real to the sensations of the body and the stories of the mind.
Well, the first one is attending.
Attending is first. Attending, being real to
Yeah.
the sensations of the body and the stories that may be in the mind. Just
Yeah.
being very honest with yourself. Well, before I ask you about attunement, what do you do when you do this? When you attend to yourself? Is it a breath? Is it a stepping back? Is it a...
I mean, personally or with clients?
Personally.
I pray.
Same thing every time? Or is
Oh
it
gosh, no. I grew up, so my mom's Christian, and one of the most devoted, kind, non-preachy, does not talk about it, Christians I've ever met. And my mom used to take me to go and sing to people that were dying when I was 5.
Whoa.
Like, my mom's just present to people and always has been, and I learned a lot of that from her. And so when I pray, it's like I prayed this morning, like I'm feeling nervous and I'm feeling scared and I'm feeling myself panic and start to make actions that I don't know are the best thought out. And, Spirit, I don't know that I'm making the right choice right now, but I open myself to your guidance and I offer it to you. And that's really most of what my prayer is even saying, I journal a lot, so I'll be like, I'm praying, and even as I pray, there's a part of me that has this agenda that's like, I'm hoping that by praying you're going to fix them. I'm hoping you can even see past this and help me see what I need to see. Like, just being so honest, and I know, like, agenda's a big one for me to just try and be mindful of and present to, because we all have agendas, like, it's natural, but if I can just own it, I can allow. The last time I was here, I remember being nervous and like, is stuff gonna happen? I got very busy, but I didn't know, right? And so every day I just pray. Like I sat in that. I'm not the most patient human. I sat in this and just prayed it. Like, I'm feeling this. Help me be with it. I'm not trying to fix it. Help me allow it. That's how I attend. That's my fastest, most.
I think a lot of people will resonate with that, and I can imagine if people that don't resonate with prayer, there's a million ways, whether it's breath or whatever it is, movement or something, to get to that space of deep listening to your own body would be a way that I can pass it out. And then the next step you said that you guide people with is attunement. So how does the attunement phase work?
So attunement's going to work, and I mean these all kind of work together in and out, but attunement is anything from, maybe there's something I'm stuck on, right? Like I remember there's a saying a friend of mine said once, and I loved it. He's like, let go of what you're ready to let go of, but don't try to let go of the things you're not. And I was like, that's brilliant, right? Because so often we try to let things go way before they're ready. I cannot, how many people I work with where it's like, have you grieved that? Well, no, I'm just gonna,
just skip over that.
Yeah, you don't get to do that. I mean, you can, but it's gonna come up eventually.
Yeah, for sure.
So attunement is really about, now that I'm kind of humble, like for me, prayer kind of has attend and attune. And the attend part anyone could do. They don't pray. I'm noticing there's an agenda. I'm noticing I feel anxious. I'm feeling these sensations. These are, Attuning is a place of offering or creating a space for greater possibility. So if a person's spiritual, it might be a mantra, and just like a place for them to keep offering and offering and offering. If they're not spiritual, then bringing them into kind of different soundscapes and different breathscapes where they can just allow voice or sound to move through them, and the mind can start to settle, and they go back into a calmer nervous system. So they're not jumping out in fight or flight or numb. They're starting to explore it. I do a lot of work of like guided meditation of going back to the place where these little threads are held and guiding them into their body, and then actually like speaking through and to those parts of ourselves, whether it's inner child work or whether it's actually speaking from the gut Because your gut is never saying, oh, you know you shouldn't do that, that's a bad idea. That is not what your gut is saying. Your gut is saying, ugh, I don't feel good.
Yeah.
Like your gut doesn't have the story.
No.
So just guiding people into like hearing and listening and seeing different parts of themselves, whether it's energetic, whether it's physical, whether it's like thinking of metaphor. It really depends on the person, because everybody I have to meet slightly different. But just starting to give them access of a different frame of reference, whether it's physical or mental.
Beautiful. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And it can be used in any way, but it usually involves some kind of voice in that step, yeah, in some way.
Often there's voice, there's often a speaking or a hearing aspect, and often it's somatic. So while, like, just from years of, you know, adjusting and assisting, and that's what I do at home, and years in my own body work and stuff, I'll just kind of see where they are and pull them in and ask them to start moving into those places. Or I'll notice it in my body, and I use my own body as a barometer and say, you know, I'm noticing this and this and this in my body, what's happening for you? And so often there's a connection there, because I just tend to feel things as a human.
Yeah, for sure, like you're mirroring subconsciously.
Yeah, totally, like the whole mirror neuron thing, and
You know, I remember in my previous relationship, it was a beautiful relationship, a lot of love and a lot of reasons why it should work on paper. And then anytime I thought about 3, 4, 5 years in the future, my stomach just the exact sensation that you're describing. And it's like, it was so confusing, because it was actually a really heart open relationship. It was great in thoughts, but there was this deeper knowing that was like, nope. And then my body literally wasn't in resonance. It shut off from here upwards any time I thought about it. So it's like, again, there's this, the body is such a great way to connect to how present you are to yourself. But then I just love, and I'm so curious at how that manifests through the voice. So you have attending, being honest with what's real and now, attuning, some way expressing that through the soma and the body with voice, often as not, or listening. And then the third stage you guide people through is
articulation.
Articulation. What does this mean?
So articulation might just, now that we've uncovered this situation, and I love working specifically. I feel like one of the disservices sometimes in the more spiritual realm is the esoteric talk.
Yes, for sure.
Because it's wildly ungrounded. And, you know, we could talk about, we just need to like be patient and communicate well, and that's what we need to do. Or I can say, okay, so I'm having a fight with my brother, and he's doing this and I'm doing this. How do I approach this in a way that's effective? They're very different, right? I'm not having a fight with my brother, but you know, once we've gone through the somatic thing and started to see it, now we're going, okay, now how does that want to articulate itself in your life? So what does that mean? And articulation might be, okay, I want to take some time to like journal this out and really start to unravel it. That can be an articulation. It might be, wow, I realize that this relationship is really not moving the way I want it to anymore, and I want to up-level it. And so I'm going to take initiative to communicate it out and then help them figure out like what words would I say. It might be singing. I have a lot of people that come to me like, yeah, but I just want to sing. And I'm like, sweet, let's sing. Let's meet your voice where it is. So here's the fear, is the connection. What is it about singing that we want to start drawing out? Where is your growing edge? And how do we start to unravel that? And so, you know, it might be for one person, you know, they might be like, I really want to write a song, or I really want to put this into music, and I'll help them do that. Another person might be more expressive, and they're like, how can I bring more resonance to this, or bring more in? And then we'll start to see what archetypes, what aspects of their voice are being withheld, and how we can start to engage them. I did my Rise in Resonance program I did in Canada before I left, and it solidified. So I ran it first here in November, and it was kind of the first run. I ran it in Canada, and it kind of came together. And I did a similar to the teacher that you were speaking of, like kind of a sighing, where you do be at best, but I actually got them to get quite guttural, like, and let out this voice, and everyone laughs, and they get uncomfortable. And then I ask, you know, why would we do this? And, oh, so we can hear we sound funny, or, oh, so we can be okay with that. And then I said, and I put on music, and I sang from that energy. Right? Because if I'm like, like that kind of voice, which isn't quite catching today, but that, if we can communicate from that, it can move. But if we don't let ourselves ever go there, we can't.
Yes.
So that's the articulation piece, is now that you've had that energy, let's actually express it out.
So interesting. I mean, it seems like you work with voice with a capital V, so to speak. So when you say the words, you help people find their voice. The actual producing of sounds seems to be the very first layer, and it's what's going on behind. So it's finding your voice and the ability to use your voice in a way that suits what you want to do, but also able to use and find your voice in a way that you can speak when you need to speak.
Yes.
Would that be right?
Yeah.
So interesting. You know, it reminds me a little bit like of all the times, I think everyone could relate to this, that there's been a moment that you needed to speak up and you did not. And I can honestly look back in my life, and the moments that I remember this are probably some of my most shameful moments. Like, even if it wasn't something directly happened to me, but I knew that I needed to speak, but for whatever reason I held back and it got stuck in my throat.
Yeah. Like that one, that's such a huge part of my life. I grew up and I mean, it's hard for me to talk about like family dynamics and stuff, because it sounds, I don't have anger, it was just the time. And I didn't feel like I had a voice a lot of time when I was younger, to the point that when I was in June, like I'm always chatty, but to actually stand up for myself was impossible. And I would just always make it better, try and make it better. And the youngest, that's kind of a thing. It's a, you know, when I was a teenager, I mean, I lost my voice for up to 7, 8, 9 months a year for like 3 or 4 years.
Like physically lost your voice?
Lost my voice.
Wow.
So I have so many of those times in my life where I couldn't speak up. I've had ceremonies where, you know, they just started to all come flooding out, and some of the most emotional things ever. They're terrifying. One of the first things I say is, you know, that's normal. Like, I'm sure you're quite familiar with the whole Daniel Siegel's work and the polyvagal theory and all of that, where if we are outside of the window of tolerance where we feel safe, we'll either freeze or we'll start spinning out or we'll escape. And I was like, if you couldn't speak in that moment, physiologically, you might not have been able to speak in that moment.
Yeah.
And I feel like that hopefully brings a sense of compassion into it, so that we can start to unravel a bit of that shame. And then when we start to speak more, I feel like it's, I mean, very karma yoga, very action oriented. Little by little, every time we stand up for ourselves a little better, then it starts to build, you know? And I've also thought of times where, you know, maybe I should have spoken. I went through kind of a hard thing a year and a half ago, and I felt like I should tell this person something, but I was emotionally all over the place. I was ungrounded. I didn't feel like that was a safe thing to do. And there was a very strong, you should say something, but when I checked in, it was like, no. Like right now, you really don't need to speak. What you need is space. And you'll know when you need to. And I think that's as well, for me, something learning to decipher, and this is ongoing, I'm not nailing it. I'm working on it real hard. But learning how to decipher, when do I actually need to speak? When is the impetus for speaking trying to fix something? You know, trying to fix something, trying to like, fit in, trying to whatever. When is that impetus coming from a space that isn't grounded and wide? And if it's coming from that place for me, it's almost never the right time to speak. And it doesn't mean I won't get nervous when I do speak, when I do stand up for myself, for sure, but it's more that the intention that's driving it, the motivation that's driving it, feels wide. If that makes sense. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, it does. I can just imagine that a lot of people are listening right now are going like, man, I so know that feeling, and I so, I would love to know how to navigate it. And I really particularly love what you said about it's not, when you look inside, in this case I guess it would be attending, it may not be the best thing to speak for you in that moment, even if that feels like something you're compelled to do. And it also seems like the most damaging aspect of not speaking is not speaking, but a combination of the pressing down and the shame and the guilt that comes from that moment, not the moment itself.
Yeah, but the post.
The post.
The post shape.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone that like, because this is I think endemic in a number of different ways. What advice can you give someone to help navigate those moments a little more clearly?
I mean, I think first of all is that in the yoga realm we talk about this, right? The vritti, the like mapping of the mind, is at first you feel like everything's fine. I call it it's cool, I'm swearing, I hope, but the fuck yoga period, where you realize all of the shit you've been doing that has been causing you pain, and you're like, fuck yoga. It's like, you go for bliss for like 2 years, and then you're fucked.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So you hit that phase, and everybody wants, like, we want to get mad at ourselves, like, I can't believe I do this, I can't believe I do this, I can't believe this. But what we're not seeing is we already came this far.
Yes.
And so now we're going to go through this entire period where we still do the thing, but we see ourselves doing it. And the lag time starts to shrink. So maybe I don't see it for 3 weeks, then 2 weeks, then a week, then a day, then it's happening and I still can't do anything. So I think that's one element of that to be mindful
Can I give a funny story before
Please.
you continue?
Yeah.
Just on this, because there's many effective teaching communication skills that we teach, and one of them is filler words. And filler words happen to teachers particularly early on, and they'll be like, and here raise your arms up, and here step your foot forward, and here lift up to upward dog.
Yep.
And this word here is just dropped in there, and it can be many different words, but here is a common one. And I say exactly the same thing. It's like, first of all, you get it pointed out to you or you notice it yourself. Second of all, it'll drive you crazy because you'll keep on saying it without being able to stop yourself.
Totally.
And then finally, you'll have enough space there to actually let it go, right?
Yeah.
And then you'll get another one.
Yeah. And then you'll realize that you just replaced it with something else. And you're like, damn it.
But only until you're done.
Yeah. And maybe the next round. Who knows? We're really...
Okay, so the first step is kind of recognizing in the moment.
So what I think now, something that shifted for me, or is in the process of shifting, is maybe more true. One is when you go through the situation and you didn't stand up for yourself, you're not it's not being a failure, but it is an opportunity.
Yeah.
So to actually go back and instead of being like, well, I could have done that and I could have done that and spun out, but like to actually methodically think your way through the process. What was I thinking? What was I feeling? And let yourself actually go back into it and learn how, or slowly kind of open what might shift. Just to be present with all of the things that were happening. Because in that moment when you didn't speak up or you should have spoke up, you were in reactive state. But now when you're in a non-reactive state, let's bring it back and bring this openness into it so that, you know, now I'm understanding, okay, that felt like this or that happened here. And it's these tiny little widenings of our capacity, right? So even when we don't hit it, noticing that, and then when the same situation happens, and don't worry, it will. Like, I promise, you'll think you got it, and you'll be like, I'll never do that again. I've got this figured out. And then it hits you from the side, and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, totally.
So, like, it'll totally happen again. And then you go ahead and you'll do this much better. And then acknowledging that that's what you did that was better, and going through it again. Well, how did I feel? What would I have liked to have said? What did this bring up? Like, giving yourself the space to really go into it and explore it. I find one of my greatest challenges, not even greatest challenge, the main thing I do with clients is we want to skip the steps.
Yes.
But the most anxious reducing thing I have found in myself, so I was in anxiety, stress management when I was 10. I have dealt with bad anxiety almost all of my life, until probably the last 5-10 years. Is anxiety is like, I gotta, instead of actually just heading into the thing. And to head into it and just see what you can uncover each time. And so instead of it being this bad thing that happened, it's actually the greatest gift is another opportunity to see how I'm showing up. And I had a moment recently, so this is, you know, I had a situation where with somebody that has, you know, been a trigger, and I would never have been able to communicate in a situation that I had where, you know, they got angry at me, kind of berating me, and I took a couple deep breaths and I started to ask questions instead of to becoming defensive. Like, is this what you're trying to say? Is this what you mean? And then eventually said, you know, I don't think that this is actually how you feel. This isn't how I feel. I want to be respected when I'm spoken to, and until that happens, I'm going to walk away.
I bet that felt good.
I went into the other room and then sobbed. But it was like let's be honest here. But I was like, holy crap, that's 10 years of working at this.
Yeah.
It does change, it takes time, and I think our greatest enemy, I mean, I could do the whole, the greatest enemy is ourselves, but it's, the greatest enemy is impatience.
Mm-hmm. Wanting to skip that step.
Wanting to skip, or thinking that we should be further ahead.
Yeah, for sure. Comparing to somebody that already is.
Or thinking that they are.
Yes, or thinking that is so true. You know, it reminds me, there's a great analogy, I think, when it comes to these kind of situations after they happen, of like pressing a beach ball down below water. And it's like you can kind of keep it there, and it takes a huge amount of energy, or it's going to pop out in an opportune time as something reactive. Mm-hmm. It sounds like what you're saying is to not ignore it, not let it be reactive, but actually see it and feel it, and allow it to come up slowly in a safe time to do so.
Totally.
Right.
Totally. And if it comes up a little too fast and explosively, cool.
Yeah.
And we'll try it again.
Acceptance within it. It also reminds me, I don't know if you know Jordan Peterson, but
oh God, yeah. Sorry, so deep.
Right?
So deep into that world.
Okay, have you done a self-authoring program?
Oh, I haven't. No,
it's like an online program, and it's
cool.
very similar to what you're doing. It has a great process. It's very simple, but quite deep, I think.
I love him. I mean, his work's great.
I think so too. And he goes through and he says, he does it in the positive and the negative, but he goes, think of a moment that you acted in a way that you didn't feel like you should have or could have, or felt guilty about it, whatever it is, these kinds of situations. What happened, and you write out as much as you can about what happened, how you felt, the situation. Then the next step is to go, what would I do if that situation occurred again? And that's such a different thing to going, I shouldn't have done that, I feel guilty for that, I'm going to eat it with my nachos and corn chips or whatever it is, into going, well, I know this is going to occur again in some way until I've done something with it, and maybe it'll be there forever. But how can I set my mind and my body to something that's positive within that, a direction to go to?
Yeah, exactly. I love his work. I loved actually something in his book that I really loved. He's like, when him and his wife have a fight, they separate, and before they come back together, they have to figure out, realize something that they did to create that situation, and that's where they start. I was like, yeah.
It's a high level of ownership, eh?
Yeah, I love that. There's I can't remember the writer. It's a book called The Art of Possibility, which is a great audiobook. And like for like the self-helpy books, it's good. I really like grounded, tangible. It's kind of my jam. To me, what I think is grounded and tangible. But something he said was, become the game that the board, or become the board that the game is played on. So his example was, even in the situation that, let's say, I get hit by a drunk driver. Legally, totally that guy's fault. But if I can become the board that the game was played on, if I'm like, oh, they did this to me and I'm a victim. And the challenge with, I think, some of what's happening in the world is a victim mentality that's being celebrated. I think being a victim, having time for that is necessary, but then we have to move into some empowerment, right?
Yes, for sure.
And so, yes, we can say, okay, that's wrong, blah, blah, blah. But for that person individually, for them to go, okay, you know what? I drive. This happens to people who drive sometimes. It's not personal. It's not necessarily divine intervention. It just happens. So now how can I, knowing that that's a situation that I put myself at risk for, how can I maybe take this energy and use it positively? So maybe I, help to enforce greater drinking and driving laws, or maybe I turn it into something a little bit more positive. And I love that idea that we can always become the board the game is played on. I mean,
I like that too.
I'm sure you've read like Viktor Frankl's stuff. And
I love that analogy. I haven't heard that said in that same way. I don't know if you know Nick Wood, he lives here.
No.
But he always says you're always winning the game that you're playing. And I kind
I
of like that
a
too.
lot.
But I like that extra flavor of becoming the board that the game is played on. That's a whole different ball game, so to speak. Well, and in this case, it kind of brings me back around to this idea of resonance, because it really seems like a big part of your teaching is, correct me if I'm wrong, but guiding people into their own felt sense of resonance and doing the best to come back to that and live from that space.
Totally.
But you also have the extra layer of accepting and being okay when you're not in that space, because you're going to spend a lot of time in both, right?
I think that's I think that might be more important.
Right? Well, I think it's a necessary step to be resonant.
Well, and to become really curious. right? Like, it wasn't that long ago, I noticed myself, I'd done a bunch of things that were really quite arrogant. And a lot, like 5-10 years ago, I'd been like, oh, that's arrogant, I shouldn't do this. But instead I was like, that's really interesting, I wonder where that came from.
Yeah.
Because I mean, this is potentially a bit out there, but I really like even Sam Harris's idea of like, how much control do I really have?
Yeah.
Like, how much of this is just, I'm a computer that's been wired a certain way. And I believe very much that my awareness and presence can help shift the wiring, but I don't necessarily get to choose how fast that's going to happen.
For sure.
I mean, I will get impatient and crazy all the time about this, like, but if I can become curious to things, I think that's a big shift. It is the curiosity for me. So yeah, we want to open up into spaces, but then get curious, and this is a challenging thing, to get curious of where, like, let's say this arrogance or whatever, where it came from, without spitting out. And instead, I love, Carolyn May says, like, with these big questions, like, it's not an answer you have, it's an answer you come to terms with. It's almost like a relationship of understanding. So I think with people, my hope is to help them both access that space, meet themselves, but learn how to meet themselves in a way that is curious, where you're almost treating yourself both as the adult and the child, where you want to understand how to best support this child, what different language you use, how do you meet them in a way that's going to be supportive, right? So if I'm coming towards that place that's, and everything's like, you shouldn't doubt yourself, you should just believe in yourself. As soon as somebody says you shouldn't doubt yourself, you should believe in yourself, my body contracts. That is not supportive. It's just the way that they know how to say it. Now, how do I shift my language to go, oh, buddy, like, if I can see you, you take as long as you need to figure this out, but you're going to figure it out. It's very different languaging. So I think a huge element for me is the curiosity of how we meet it and letting ourselves play and figure it out. Because we're working, I mean, with voice, I'm working a lot of inner dialogue and narrative, and then connecting that somatically, and then into expression. So, yeah, it's a lot of curiosity, so much curiosity.
Yeah, I totally feel that. I'm curious when it comes to this, like, how people can get a better read on when they're feeling in resonance. There's a lot of people that, like, there'll be some people watching this that even the word resonance will be a little esoteric.
Totally.
There's others that may have some vocal training that you talk about resonance in the way that your vocal cords and the sound moving through your vocal cords hits the cavity of your mouth and nose, and to create more or less resonance in your voice.
Totally.
And how would you kind of give a soundbite to those that are like, well, I don't even know when I'm in and out of resonance in my being?
I'm just feeling it. What's coming up for me is Donna Farhi has a translation of the Gayatri Mantra, which is all that is above and all that is below stems from one effulgent source. And when my thoughts, words, and deeds have this complete understanding of unity, so it's not the thinking of unity, but are in a state of unity, I am the peace that I have been seeking. To me, that is resonance. So when I speak, and there's a sense of being in it, there's a presence of it, to me that's resonance. I this is a challenging word. I find language really difficult for me, is because so often a word gets taken and then it becomes this thing, and it's so missing what's underneath it. a sense of rightness without righteousness.
Oh, I like that. Rightness without righteousness.
A sense of it being right, but it's not righteous. It's not.
It just is.
Just is true.
Just is true. And also, I also think, finding the right words is hard because anything really worth talking about, I personally feel words don't do it justice. You can talk about marketing of words. It's good and necessary, right? But to talk about universe or this flavor, I think some of the best teachers are the ones that are able to bend their words into a way that lands in bodies like poets, for example. And this idea of resonance, and it's something that I'll give someone when they're making a decision, an assignment. Often I have trainees reach out to me for trainings. I don't know what to do. There's this, and there's this training, and there's this one. It's just the very well-meaning and necessary logical mind weighing up pros and cons. So we'll just sit, write down your paper, should I go? Sit for 20 minutes, breathe. And when you open your eyes, start to write from that space. And it's like, once you become curious, as you say, and attuned to your body is a constant guiding compass. So for those of you that are watching, if there's some decision that's in your life or something that you want to come to, this is the knowing is already there, and it's just coming back to that sense of integration and presence in the moment.
And I would add, if I may, to that, like with everything going on with COVID and all that that's happening now, should I leave, should I go, blah, 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 today? And I was like, I could feel myself being pulled by, well, this person's afraid, and I'm like having to go back, like, if every choice I made was completely acceptable and was safe, what feels really right for me?
Right.
And I find that a lot of it is, what would the answer be if it didn't affect anybody else?
I like that.
Because
it's a really powerful question.
Yeah, so often I think we get lost on, well, they think this, and I'm really lucky. Like, I'm lucky to have a mom who's like, you do what's right for you, honey, and has my whole life. Like, like, I'm lucky to have that, but that's not true for a lot of us. And so to ask, what would I do if it didn't, there was no it didn't affect anybody, what would I do that would really be true for me?
Yeah, it's beautiful. I think it's important, particularly in these times, for sure. And both those questions also remind me of your quote about the board, right? Like both of them coming back to, this is the board, what is the board you're playing on?
Totally. What is the game I want to play?
I want to ask a question that's slightly different. I don't know how to ask it. But I'm just more curious than anything else. That's why I do all of these things. I'm just very curious. I like interviewing people that I find interesting. I find you very interesting. What I've noticed is that cultures get stuck in their voice differently. And like New Zealanders who have a tall poppy syndrome, we call it. We never want to be the poppy that's sticking out above the rest. It's like the opposite of Americans, right? So we always want to be not standing out or a little more, so we kind of speak from the back of our voice, and often it just trails off into nothing. It's this shift back. Yeah. And in Australia it's a little different. Australia, I think New Zealanders are more like Canadians, Australians are more like Americans. Australia, they like being seen, but they're also like, you walk into the supermarket and they're like, hi, how you doing today? And it's that thing we were doing before, like, And if you go, actually, I'm doing really good, how are you? Then they just, like, it doesn't quite compute.
Totally.
You're almost like punted out of the paradigm. And it seems to me that there's so much caught up in your voice that isn't just from your own experience and where it's stuck in your body, but there's a cultural thing going on as well, right?
Yeah, I would agree with you completely on that.
So interesting. So when we get people in the trainings, we have people from 20, 30, 40 people, and they're all from different countries, and it's so curious to see how it is that they show up in that moment of needing to speak. Because most of them haven't had public speaking experience in the first place, and they go to speak and like their body starts to do very unusual things. People will like flamenco dance with their legs. They'll suddenly like do something very weird with one hand, and like all of these the symbols of their past is caught up in their voice, and it's caught up in the very moment. So for those, I guess for those people that do, and maybe it's already what we've been speaking about, but that do either teach or give meetings in front of people, and they get that nerves and they know their body's not quite doing what they would want it to do if they saw themselves, what can they do in a few moments to drop in and let it come naturally?
First of all, I have to say, I love everything you just said and how much you moved your hands, because that's my answer. Sylvina Catch is one of the people I've studied with, and she's really interesting. She's been doing bhakti work for a long time, and she talks about how voice, you can use your hands. And so, for example, if I sing, I'm often just having somewhere else that my voice can move from, and being present to the fingertips and the hands can be a helpful way of doing that. I really love that. I'd say a sigh, and a sigh and letting your voice drop.
Yeah.
Especially, you tend to talk falsetto all the time, which can happen culturally, especially for women. Being, and letting yourself feel that as you speak. Those would be kind of the two just drop-intos. Moving, I sometimes with singing, and I got this actually from a woman named Tamara Beatty, who's one of my vocal coach I work with, and she works with like the people on The Voice and like these big. She's amazing. She's great, and we have great conversations. We just are very different realms. To have people watch themselves in a mirror, and I'll use a mirror when they speak or they sing, and then to keep fluidity. And so they have to keep, right? Because if I'm nervous of speaking, the first thing to tighten up is right here.
Yeah.
So just even overdoing it,
yes, for sure,
to become more allowing of the body to move with the voice. And that's something people can do privately.
Yeah.
Right? Like they can play with that privately. I think on the other end of that spectrum are the people who talk like this and they have everything to say and they want to share all of the information and they really want to tell you about the next thing that you're going to do, and you're like, geez, count to 10 between sentences. Like, I'll actually just get people to count. Say something, take a deep breath, take a full exhale, then you can say something.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Such good advice. It reminds me of something that we'll do in the trainings earlier on. Once I got some basics down, so I know where they're going, and they'll be teaching, we'll pause and we'll just be like, all right, now teach like a tiger. I love it. Teach like a rock star, like it's very interesting to get that physical, because then their brain is no longer worried about their voice and what they're saying.
Their brain is like, I gotta
be a tiger. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Hey, there's something else that
I love this.
We do a lot of really weird stuff with it.
Good.
It's actually my favorite part, the teaching.
The best stuff.
It's why I got interested in voice, because I've been public speaking in different ways from a relatively young age, and I never had that much of a trouble with it. My mum coached me a lot in some really beautiful ways, and it's something that I feel most attuned and connected when I'm in the front of a group. It's undoubtable for me. So I did a little bit of study into it a long time ago, more in how to work with groups and on voice, and my voice developed very naturally as a speaking voice in big groups over 6 years of working with large audience on chips. But then I got to these trainings and I'm like, all right, well, I know it's really important that when they're in Shavasana, the tambra and the resonance shifts to create this state of relaxation, which is very different to when they're holding something and they need my strength. It's an exchange of energy for you to stay here and breathe, But then I didn't know how to teach it. I didn't know how to give that as a concept and as an idea to people, which is what got me into speaking to vocal coaches in the first place. One thing I wanted to speak up before we start kind of winding towards the end is you played in a couple of my classes, and it happened at a really interesting time in my teaching development. I was trying on some new ideas and realizing what I really want to bring across in teaching. And something in the way that you sang and created singing doesn't do it justice, but the way that you created a soundscape for the space really unlocked some big piece of the puzzle for me. So first of all, I want to say thank you.
You're welcome.
It was, each time it's been totally gorgeous, and if you haven't been in one of the classes, I mean, the first one was the Ganesha, I think you did, and it was a 90-minute class, and I think it was just the one
I played one
chant.
mantra for 90 minutes.
90 minutes?
It was the first time I'd ever done that,
Really?
too. Yeah.
It was insane.
I was like, I think I'm just going to do this the entire time and keep pulling out of it.
And I think, you hear that and you're like, man, that would be so annoying if you weren't there, like you hear it.
Yeah.
But actually what happened was
like, it was so
this
good.
really weird space of like being in the chant and the music, you disappearing, though the music being present, and then there'd be kind of a consciousness of like, oh, it's the same chant, and then it would just like disappear again. And there's a couple of things I want to ask you about this. The first one is, you have an incredible talent for taking yourself out of the music. As in, a lot of musicians that I've worked with, or performers that I've worked with, they need to be, it's more about them than it is about the feeling in the room. And that might be connected to the second question, which is, what it sounds like to me that when you sing and you create that space, that you're actually channeling. Like, it's not a conscious thought of where to go next, but it's this continuous flow in the room. So I'd love to get your insight on these things.
It's funny, I've definitely been the artist that wants to be seen. 15 years of teaching, I'm all about feeling the room. And I fell in love with this music because it has nothing to do with me.
Inherently devotional.
It is just about feeling and playing. And that class for me, because we barely knew each other.
No.
And I was like dying. I was so happy. I was like, this is the coolest. And it was just, everything was just going through. And I was like, I didn't even know this could happen. I mean, I really enjoy working with teachers who are seasoned, right? Like, I'm really lucky I worked with you. I've worked with Megan. I've worked with Janet Stone. Like, these are incredible teachers where I really do get to do that. And why I fell in love with this music. So I was doing folk music, and I released a record and was traveling it, and was doing this on the side and realizing I love this more because it had nothing to do with me. It was no longer about my story and my pain and my stuff. I was like, I am really just trying to let whatever's coming through and follow it because that's my offering. So I think those are parts of it. Like, teaching is one of the reasons why I hopefully can hold that space in the soundscape. And it is intuitive. Like, those songs have to get to a certain place where I can let them be intuitive. It's hard to do that, obviously, with something new. But I've done it straight out the board and just made stuff up with teachers as well. Because it becomes a playground, and we're all in it. It's not about any of us. Right? I think as well, to work with a teacher where I feel you are offering the same thing. You're flowing with an experience. You're not, now I'm going to show them this and this is going to be amazing and that's great, which is fine. It's fine. That has its own place too, but to allow for music to dance in and out, allow us to access that space of like prayer, or like you bring them down and then I come in with a different song and then you pull them out, like that to me that's like the funnest shit ever.
That's a total dance, eh?
It was so good.
What does it feel like? What does it feel like? Because like, if you haven't seen Amy in these classes, it's not like she's sitting there with a guitar. She's got, as you call it, a fort, right? Like, there's a keyboard and there's a guitar.
Which hangs so I can sing into it or play it, and then a drum machine and a loop pedal.
I just totally remember turning around one time and you had your guitar in front of your face.
Yeah.
Facing the strings, and you're like singing and you're smiling, and I'm like, and no one else can see you. They're probably down in child's pose or something, I don't know. And it's like, wow, this is somebody doing what they're meant to be doing. What does it feel like in your body, in your mind, in those let's say mind disappearing moments? What is that like?
I'm really glad you asked this, because there was a word I wanted to bring up earlier. When you said some people have to move beyond words, it's more like poetry. There's a word called alamkara, that's my era. And alamkara it's described Douglas Brooks uses it in The Dance of Shiva. And it's the place where we're no longer trying to figure out the language, or the place where we're no longer the philosopher and being like, what's happening? It's when the dance moves through you. And the charm of the poet, Alamkara, I think it means ornament, but it's kind of how it's always enough and there's always more. And it's like, to me, it's Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen. Like, I can sing that song 1,000 times and it never dies. It is always as potent. And those moments, that day particularly, that to me is Alamkara. It's like, it just moves through and it takes me. And I get to be a part of it. It's like, I'm just really grateful the whole time. I'm like, thanks so much for bringing me. This is cool.
It's awesome.
Alamkara,
it's Sanskrit?
Alamkara, yeah.
Sanskrit?
Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me, who's the author of the Harry Potter series?
Oh, Elizabeth. Is that Elizabeth's Big Magic too, isn't it? No. I'm thinking Elizabeth Gilbert, but that's not her.
There's people watching this that are screaming their name back.
Yeah, totally. Sorry.
Whoever she was, she described this beautiful thing. It's like, I always travel with a pen and a notebook when I walk, because sometimes an idea can come towards me like a wave, and if I don't catch that wave, then it can disappear. Yeah. It's like, that's a beautiful feeling.
I love that. Well, I think Elizabeth Gilbert, or whatever, they talk about it in like Big Magic, where it's like, it used to be, people weren't geniuses. A genius was something that came through.
Yes.
And if you could catch it,
as a kid could.
It's not about you.
It's a state.
Yeah,
it's a state of being.
And shit, I lost that genius. Dang it. Like, and then it's the genius's fault if it goes terribly too, so it's fine. Like, it's never.
How do you spell that, Alamkara?
Alamkara, Alamkara.
Yeah, I love that. I haven't heard that before.
There's a Douglas Brooks talk about the depictions of Shiva and kind of the unraveling of consciousness. So at first it's like Shiva in the burial grounds, where it's very like black and white, like death or not. It's the gambler or the grammarian. It's learning a language and trying to figure it out and decipher it. Does this work? No. And then it's Shiva on the mountaintop, which is super like, it's like you can see everything, but you have no idea what it means. And it's kind of a what the fuck moment where anything can impact you and you can see it all, but it's like hard to stay grounded.
Yeah.
And then it's Shiva as the dancer or the poet, when like now he dances and life moves through him, and it's like the progression of consciousness. And I see it as the progression of like instinct through intelligence being all the intelligences into intuition. That's how I put it together.
How it moves through.
Yeah.
I love that. And you've mentioned the name of a number of different teachers. I'm just wondering, for people that are interested, I want them to tell you about how they can find you too, but who are your, and it doesn't have to be for voice, but who are your top 2 or 3 people that have really moved and inspired you over your life in terms of teachers?
Julia Cameron, The Artist's Way, when I was in my 20s. That book was my Bible for a while. For this type of work, God, there's been so many. It's hard. There's the more recent teachers. Janet Stone, when I started to work with her, she hasn't, I haven't done a lot of studying under her, just a little bit. It's more just at this point how she handles herself within what she does. Like, she's one of the most down to earth, solidly kind humans that I have nothing but praise for her and her crew. Like, even her community, her sangha, like, they're just, even though I haven't done a lot of work with her, I've borrowed stories that she's taught me, and I share them. And she is a teacher I aspire to be like, very much. My mom.
Nice.
But actually,
I mean, when you said before that she'd take you to people who are dying when you're 5 years old, like, she sounds like a really inspirational woman.
My mom, she's just, her whole life, I mean, there's the challenges of humans, but like my mom's devotion to people, my mom's ability even when I was younger to really not put her shit on me ever. Really, like, she was really amazing at that. Even today, talking to her and her being like, I know, honey, whatever you need to do, it is what it is. And I'm like, she didn't really want me to come, but she was like, I don't want to tell you because I don't want it to influence you. And I was like, I'm sorry that I'm here and I'm so far away. She's like, it is what it is. And you just move on. And I think that I don't know what would have happened to me if I had been born into a very kind of hippie-ish family, because I think my family has just anchored me with a lot of critical thinking. They've really, I was never, I grew up being told you're smarter than that, you can figure that out. And you grew up thinking, like, something breaks, I can figure out how to fix it. Like that kind of thing. And I'd say that all of them give me that, but my mom's level of empathy and presence and deep listening is one of the most epic things that she blows my mind. She was so good and is so good.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Amy's mom, if you're listening.
I love
for creating
you,
this beautiful human.
I don't know that you're going to figure out how to put this on a phone or computer, but if you're here, I love you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, totally.
So let's wrap it up. There's the question that I ask each people that come on is that if you could have a sign or a billboard in every yoga shala in the world, what would it say?
Just listen. Just listen. Not think, not do, not act. Just listen. I really believe that the voice inside of you, inside of all of us, I really believe that voice will speak if we're willing to listen.
Just listen. I love it.
Yeah, this is fun.
Yeah.
This is great.
I so appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thank you. This is such a fun day.
Yeah, actually, ever since we kind of met and you came and sang, I'm like, wow, she's got some juice there, and it's been so fun, like exploring. Even though it's just 10%, it's fun exploring it. And I can imagine there's some people that watch or listen to this later on that are like, oh, I want to get some of that juice. So what's the best way for them to find you or to listen to your music? I know you have some stuff on Spotify, but that's
well, if you look up my name, you're getting breakup records from my past.
Oh, yeah.
But if you go to amythiessenlive.com, I'm revamping the website again, just tidying it, but everything is there. So people can sign up for a free 20-minute one-on-one and just talk to me and see if it's a fit.
Cool.
There's connections to my music, connections to videos. I think if you sign up for newsletter, you get like a 25-minute of the Triambakam Mahamrityunjaya mantra to just kind of like sink into. So the one that you've heard,
yes,
but like 25 minutes long. It's like the one that started it, and I love it. It's actually a little bit more primal and a little bit more like. Anyway.
And they get that by signing up for the newsletter?
Yeah,
very
they can
cool.
email, they can download it, and then I work. I mean, either in person or online. I might have a lot more space available in the coming days.
Exactly.
Find some
Most
good
of us here in
internet.
Bali will do.
Yeah, so online. And I'm really taking this time with everything going on to kind of step back and see how I want to support the community. I do a class called Jnana to Bhakti at home, where it's invite only. There's no cell phones. There's no Instagram. That's not even allowed.
Nice.
You have to come by either being invited or somebody wants to invite you.
Nice.
And we talk about these topics. And we spend an hour like just talking and asking each other, and sometimes like therapists have been there been working for 30 years come, and just to give a space where we can dialogue and disagree.
Awesome.
And then we sing. So it's like this tends to bring up shit. So then we just sing it up. And we're just like, we don't have to understand it. We're just gonna sing it.
I love that it's combining the two themes that come up with you is like the practicality and then also the devotional aspect.
Totally.
Yeah.
Head and
this
heart.
one first though.
Yeah, just put these together.
I love it.
Mush 'em.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. This has been really lovely.
Welcome. It's been really fun.
Yeah.
And go to a website. Check out go to a mantra before the breakup songs if you want to go to the breakup songs.
Sundari Studios.
Sundari Studios. Have a listen, and if you're interested exploring your voice and your potential, and to check the way that really what it's looking at is understanding where you are and how connected to yourself and the world you are, and how that's expressed through the mechanism of your voice. This is the person you want to get in touch with. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
It's so good.